Good afternoon and welcome on the World Focus here on SMBC News. My name is Lamin Faal, presenting live from BIS FM 88.5. And in our today's headlines, 3 immigration officers have been taken off duty together with 2 police officers. The military has revealed that Mamadou Jaju is a civilian and not a jungler. Former Interior Minister and leader of the Gambia Moral Congress has reacted to the police's recent suspension of all permits to hold political activities, saying the law enforcement agency has no such power to do so. 3 immigration officers have been taken off duty together with 2 police officers. 2 senior police officers commanding airport operations have been moved from that posting, police sources told reporters yesterday. The 2 whose names have not been given were removed from the airport as part of an internal measure following the turmoil after key Jammeh aides flew into the country undetected at the airport. In a related development, 3 immigration officers in duty at the time of the arrival of the Jammeh aides have been banned pending investigations. The military has revealed that Mamadou Jaju is a civilian and not a jungler. Major Lamin Faal, the public relations officer of the Gambia Armed Force, has said that they have no idea concerning the involvement of one Mamadou Jaju, a civilian who just returned from Equatorial Guinea with General Umpamendi and Ansumana Tamba in alleged jungler activities. According to PRO Sanyang, Mr. Jaju is a civilian and was questioned, then released by personnel of the military police. We have no information about whether he is a jungler or not. However, what I can tell you is that he is a civilian and he was among the people that just returned from Equatorial Guinea. I believe some local media that report about the escaped jungler Jaju were referring to the same civilian man. Former Interior Minister and leader of the Gambia Moral Congress has reacted to the police's recent suspension of all permits to hold political activities, saying the law enforcement agency has no such power to do so. Mai Ahmad Fati was speaking to Paradise FM yesterday. He said under the Constitution, the IGP cannot stop political activities in the country. He further stressed that can only happen when there is a state of emergency, and that can only be determined by the National Assembly. He called on Gambians to be law-abiding and be loyal to the country. Mai Fati also added his voice to the recent entrance of Umpamendi and Ansumana Tamba into the country with ease, saying if things were done properly, the 2 former Jammeh military aides would have found it difficult to enter the country. According to Fati, the passports they are traveling with were nullified. Their passports are not good. Their entry into the country must be investigated, and the papers they traveled with should be known. Fati added that the men must be investigated and, if necessary, taken to court, saying because the Constitution says whoever is serving in the military and stays away for 3 to 6 months without returning to their post or barracks is no more considered a military officer. Mai Fati further observed that the country's security sectors lack the required unity to maintain law and order. If the security is stable and united, then the immigration who are responsible of borders will ensure the foreigners and Gambians coming in and out are known and well articulated. He further stressed, therefore, when he took over as Interior Minister, he decided to put a halt on the issuance of ID cards and passports. On what he would have done differently, Fati said, I would have acted differently, but I would not tell you what I would have done because I don't want to contradict the decision of the government. Asked whether he would want to work for the government again, Fati added working for this country is what he stands for, and that he is always ready to serve the country at all times. immigration officers have been taken off duty together with 2 police officers. The military has revealed that Mobudu Jaju is a civilian and not a jungler. Former Interior Minister and leader of the Gambia Moral Congress has reacted to the police's recent suspension of all permits to hold political activities, saying the law enforcement agency has no such power to do so. That was all we have for you for the national news, and we'll be back with stories beyond our borders after the short break.
Others report about the Gambia, they do so with half measures. With SMBC News on BSFM, you are guaranteed the full truth.
In and around the Gambia, our reporters are on the ground digging up the facts and reporting them the way they should be.
From Banjul to Janjanburi, Brikama to Bansang, Katong to Koina.
SMBC News is there with analysts, experts, and special contributors to break the news to you as it unfolds.
SMBC News on Beast FM, bringing the backstory to your front headline.
Balde, and you're listening to SMBC News on BSFM, on air at 88.5 and online at smbcnews.com.
I am Zainab Jabate, and you're listening to SMBC News on Base FM, where we bring the backstory to your front headline.
Welcome back, and be reminded that this is the World Focus here on SMBC News, and I'm Lamin Faal presenting live from BIS FM 88.5. And now to news beyond our borders. In our top headlines, ISIL claims attack on Save the Children in Jalalabad. Rohingya women are being gang raped by the Myanmar army. One-time U.S. gymnastics doctor sentenced to 175 years in prison. Syrian refugees calls on Lebanon to take them in. ISIL claims attack on Save the Children in Jalalabad. The global charity Save the Children has suspended its operation in Afghanistan after a deadly attack on its Jalalabad office. While 46 people in the building were rescued, a soldier and 3 staff members were killed in the siege. Several others were wounded. ISIL has claimed responsibility for the attack.
The attack began with a car bomb at the door of the Save the Children office in Jalalabad, eastern Afghanistan. The gunmen stormed the building. For more than 8 hours, they battled Afghan security forces while dozens of Save the Children staff were trapped inside. The building was set on fire. Eventually, Afghan police and soldiers killed the attackers and rescued the staff. Afghanistan is one of the most dangerous places for children to be born, following decades of war, insecurity, and poverty. For 12 years, Save the Children has worked with Afghan communities to help kids survive. But the attack on the agency's office in Jalalabad suggests it's becoming increasingly difficult for staff to help Afghans without becoming victims of the conflict themselves.
It's quite possible that, say, the children would leave Afghanistan, and the onus is on the Afghan government to provide security for them.
Latest statistics on aid worker security show that over the last 15 years, their jobs have become much more dangerous. In 2016, there were 158 attacks on aid organizations around the world, in which 101 aid workers were killed, 98 wounded, and 89 kidnapped. That's almost triple the number of attacks in 2003. South Sudan is the most dangerous country for aid workers, followed by Afghanistan and Syria. The UN humanitarian coordinator calls Afghanistan one of the most challenging and dangerous environments for humanitarians. In 2017, 17 aid workers were killed and 32 injured. Doctors Without Borders withdrew from the northern Afghan city of Kunduz in 2015 after the medical charities hospital was mistakenly destroyed by a U.S. airstrike. And last year, the International Red Cross, which has operated in Afghanistan for more than 30 years, closed 2 clinics and limited its operations nationwide after 7 staff members were killed and others abducted.
Now we're in a very explosive situation, I think, where we know the communities can no longer guarantee our safety and our access. And that's now where it's becoming extremely difficult to know who we can rely on, and that's the challenge today, more so than in the last 30 years.
Afghanistan is dependent on aid organizations. If gunmen were to drive them out, the Afghan government can't support the social services programs on which millions of Afghans depend.
Save the Children says it helps 1.4 million children in Afghanistan, and it's committed to its work here. The organization would like to restart its programs, but it can only do so when it's sure its staff can work safely.
Rohingya women are being gang raped by the Myanmar army. Myanmar military has been accused of using gang rape as a part of an ethnic cleansing campaign against the Rohingya. Rights groups say the attacks occurred during a recent crackdown in Rakhine state in which 7,000 people are thought to have been killed.
These sisters, 15 and 17 years old, say Myanmar army soldiers tied them to trees and gang raped them. The eldest says her sister lost consciousness as the second man began to brutalize her. The army surrounded our house, she says. My sister and I were in the bathroom. The soldiers burst in and dragged us outside. 7 men raped me. She says passers-by found them unconscious and still tied to the trees. It was difficult to walk, she says, but they helped us. It took us 15 days to walk to the Bangladesh border.
Rights groups say that the Myanmar army used gang rape as part of its ethnic cleansing campaign that killed thousands of people and destroyed their homes in Rakhine state. They also say that Myanmar's case highlights massive flaws in the international criminal justice system, and there are questions being asked as to whether the interests of powerful countries like China could jeopardize Myanmar ever fully being called to account.
Gathering evidence in Myanmar is almost impossible at the moment. The Myanmar government has banned the UN's top human rights investigator from entering the country.
Myanmar has made a very big mistake in banning myself and also the fact-finding mission and other investigative teams for going in, because this is exactly what the world needs to see and hear from, is the first-hand reports from persons like myself and others.
Rights groups say the UN Security Council should refer Myanmar to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. But the ICC only has jurisdiction over crimes committed by states that have signed its founding treaty, the Rome Statute, and Myanmar is not a signatory. Getting Myanmar an ICC referral on the UN Security Council would likely fail because of China's power of veto. China's interests in Myanmar are growing. These include oil pipelines across Rakhine and the construction of a deep water port. The girls now live with the woman that found them in the camp 4 months ago. They say they heard gunshots inside their house as they were dragged away. They say their mother, father and 3 siblings were inside as the soldiers locked the front door behind them and set their home on fire.
A court in Brazil confirms conviction of former president. A court in Brazil has upheld a conviction against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva for corruption and money laundering. It's a major setback for his plans to run again for presidency, but he insisted he will seek re-election in October.
These people are standing by Lula da Silva. They're convinced he will be Brazil's next president despite a court's ruling that makes it almost impossible for him to run. The resistance will never die. We lost the battle, but not the war. Lula for president 2018.
People here say that an election without former President Lula da Silva is an equivalent to committing fraud. They say that a court cannot ban the most popular politician in the country from running for office, and they say that they will continue fighting until they see Lula become president once again.
On Wednesday, an appeals court upheld his conviction for corruption and money laundering. It even increased the sentence to 12 years and 1 month. One of the judges said there is no doubt that the former president was involved in a corruption scheme.
I looked at these questions one by one, reaffirming specifically that the issue of culpability is the largest vector for the sentence, and I considered culpability to be extremely high in this case.
It happened in the city of Porto Alegre, where extreme security measures were taken to prevent clashes between Lula supporters and those who backed the court's decision. In Sao Paulo, Brazil's economic capital, many celebrated. Lula thinks he shouldn't be investigated because he's God. All his companions are behind bars and are incriminating him. We want justice. Lula should be arrested. He must be convicted. Lula is now 72. He was Brazil's first working-class president and is credited with lifting millions out of poverty. The court's judgment complicates his chances of making it to this year's presidential race. But Lula remains defiant.
For me, this court ruling is an opportunity to travel through Brazil and have a dialogue with the Brazilian people. Now I can see that everything that they're doing is to close the door to my candidacy. This provocation is so shameful. But now I want to be candidate for the presidency of the Republic.
Brazilian law bans candidates who have been convicted from running for office. There are 2 legal moves Lula can make to avoid prison and to fight to be allowed to run in October's election. But for many, that will now be tougher than his supporters would like to admit.
Women gawped at an all-men party in the United Kingdom. In the UK, a report on an undercover investigation into sexual harassment at a men-only charity fundraising gala has caused outrage. The Financial Times sent 2 reporters undercover to work as hostesses at the annual President's Club charity dinner in London's Dorchester Hotel, attended by senior figures from the world of business, politics and finance.
An exclusive charity evening in one of London's smartest hotels. It's called the President's Club, so exclusive that the only guests are men. Some of Britain's leading bankers, businessmen, property developers, whilst the only women, like the undercover reporter who took these pictures, are hostesses, told to wear sexy clothes, forced to sign a document saying they won't talk about what happened here. One of the auction prizes, plastic surgery to make, we're told, your wife more attractive. Other prizes, tea with the Governor of the Bank of England, lunch with the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. The women are repeatedly groped, harassed, invited to bedrooms upstairs.
The men were initially quite coarse, and things very quickly took a turn for the worse. Some of the behaviour was pretty shocking and depressing.
Politicians from all parties say they're outraged.
Women have the right to feel safe wherever they work, and allegations of this type of behaviour are completely unacceptable.
Awkward then that a government minister attended the evening. He says he left early, he was appalled by the behaviour, and no, he doesn't plan to resign. A leading hospital that receives some of the $3 million raised by the President's Club has returned the money. And then there's the hotel, the Dorchester, where the event took place, beloved by royalty and movie stars. It says it's deeply concerned at the allegations. An investigation is underway. Barnaby Phillips.
According to two reporters, some of the 130 women employed as hostesses to entertain the all-men guest list were subjected to groping, lewd sexual comments and repeated requests to join diners in the bedroom.
We steer essential conversations on national issues from a global perspective, even when it is difficult to read the heart of the story.
We go behind the headlines to engage and seek the voice and views of those making decisions that affect Gambian lives.
SMBC News on Beast FM, bringing the backstory to your front headlines.
And you are listening to SMBC News on Beast FM, on air at 88.5 and online at smbcnews.com.
Welcome back. We reminded that this is the World Focus here on SMBC News, and my name is Lamin Faal, presenting live from Beast FM 88.5. ISIL claims attack on Save the Children in Jalalabad. Rohingya women are being gang raped by the Myanmar army. One-time U.S. gymnastics doctor is sentenced to 175 years in prison. Syrian refugees call on Lebanon to take them in. One-time U.S. gymnastics doctor is sentenced to 175 years in prison. The former U.S. gymnastics doctor, Larry Nassar, has been sentenced to 175 years in prison for sexually assaulting women and girls. The judge allowed 4 days of statements by the victims before sentencing. Among Nassar's victims is one of the most highly decorated gymnasts in Olympic history.
The staggering sentence mattered less than the statement it made.
Wow! Mister, what have you done?
Dr. Larry Nassar was already handed a 60-year prison term for related child pornography last month that will keep the 54-year-old away from children for life.
Perhaps you have figured it out by now, but little girls don't stay little forever. They grow into strong women that return to destroy your world.
He pleaded guilty to molesting 7 girls in USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University through intimate treatments that he told them had therapeutic value.
2009. She took her own life because she couldn't deal with the pain anymore.
But he was accused by more than 150 women.
And how dare you say sorry about everything you've done and all the lives you've destroyed. We all see right through your bull now. You're a pathetic monster that is only sorry you got caught.
The accusers included gold medalists Simone Biles, Allie Reisman, Gabby Douglas, and Michaela Maroney, whose statement was read by a prosecutor.
Dr. Nassar was not a doctor. He, in fact, was and forever shall be a child molester, a monster of a human being. End of story. He abused my trust. He abused my body, and he left scars on my psyche that may never go away.
The victim's anger went beyond Nassar.
This monster was also the architect of policies and procedures that are supposed to protect athletes from sexual abuse for both USA Gymnastics and the USOC. Abusers, your time is up. The survivors are here, standing tall, and we are not going anywhere.
On Monday, 3 leaders of USA Gymnastics, the national governing body for the Olympic sport, resigned under pressure. Among Nasser's latest accuser is Biles, one of the most decorated gymnasts in Olympic history. On Twitter, she said she dreaded returning to the training center where she was abused. This week, USA Olympics announced it will close the Texas center that haunts her. Whether the organization can regain the trust of dozens of women who say it failed to protect them remains an open question.
Syrian refugees calls in Lebanon to take them in. Syrians who survived a deadly snowstorm along the country's mountainous border are calling on the Lebanese government to open its doors to refugees. 17 refugees froze to death while illegally crossing into Lebanon along a well-known people smuggling route last week.
Ahmed survived, but she watched her father-in-law and sister-in-law freeze to death. Syrian refugees were caught in a fierce snowstorm as people smugglers trekked them across mountains to reach Lebanon. 17 people died, including children. Ahmed said they asked the smugglers for help, but instead they abandoned them.
We asked the smuggler to help us go back. He wanted money. He kept threatening us with guns. We had no choice but to comply. My father-in-law was old and needed to go back, and my children needed me. I had to go back.
The smuggling route is an 8-hour journey through difficult terrain, and on that particular day, weather conditions were very bad. The rescue and search effort lasted for days. Ahmed is from the city of Raqqa. She went back to Syria because she couldn't afford to treat her sick child in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Her 1-month-old girl died in Syria, and Ahmed had to return to her family in Lebanon. Syrians like her can't use government-run border crossings. His nieces, Maryam and Hannah, lost their mother, Aisha al-Musa. The girls need to go back to Syria to be raised by their grandmother, but because they entered Lebanon illegally, the only way back is through the mountains.
Leaders in Davos brace for Trump's America First agenda. The U.S. president is taking his nationalist and protectionist agenda to the global stage at Davos. Donald Trump arrives today. Trump will be the first U.S. president to address the meeting in Davos since Bill Clinton 18 years ago.
On the eve of Donald Trump's arrival in Davos, an anti-Trump cold front has blown into town. Leader after world leader has taken to the podium this week to warn about the dangers of populism and protectionism. The young French President Emmanuel Macron was to have been the star attraction this year until Trump announced he was coming.
Merci beaucoup. Ladies and gentlemen, my first message is that France is back. France is back at the core of Europe.
Now Macron is leading the resistance.
Quelques dizaines de kilomètres d'ici.
A few kilometers from here, there are people who think the solution is to get out of globalization. And there are more and more people who are convinced that that is the right option. Now, that means we have a major challenge to meet.
Earlier it was the turn of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who talked about what she called a polarizing state of affairs.
Wir glauben, dass Abschottung uns nicht weiterführt.
We believe isolationism will get us nowhere. We believe we have to cooperate, and the protectionism is not the right answer.
But the politics of Davos go beyond Trump. This year the spotlight has fallen on new leadership in Africa. The likely next president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, is here, as is the man they call the Crocodile. Emerson Mnangagwa earned his nickname as a fighter in Zimbabwe's War of Liberation. He's now the man who plans to put Zimbabwe back together again after decades of Robert Mugabe's rule.
Now we are saying to the world, Zimbabwe is now open for business.
Zimbabwe has good reason to be hopeful. The global economy is doing well for the moment, putting a slushy spring in investors' steps.
Congolese in their numbers flee to Uganda to escape violence. People fleeing the east of Democratic Republic of Congo say they are escaping a surge in rapes, killings and abductions by armed groups. The UN says more than 10,000 have arrived in neighboring Uganda since the beginning of December. Congo is facing a political crisis that has prompted protests, a violent crackdown by police, and an escalation of armed conflicts in several parts of the country.
Rebecca Salama says many of her neighbours have been killed or raped in recent weeks. Armed groups keep attacking her village in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's why she's walked here to neighbouring Uganda with her family. They're met by Ugandan soldiers near the border.
When you go to pick your crops or go to the forest for firewood, if you're a man, they kill you. And if you're a woman, they'll rape you. That's why we came here.
Along with other new arrivals, Rebecca continues her journey in a UN truck. UN says more than 10,000 people have arrived here in the last month, fleeing a spike in violence at home. Everyone we spoke to says they don't know which armed group's attacking them or why. They say the fighters carry guns, wear uniforms and speak languages from all over Congo and neighbouring Rwanda. Since it's not safe at home, this refugee transit camp's the better option. Tired and covered with dust, the new arrivals first have to line up here and get their feet sprayed with disinfectant, and everyone's made to come over here and wash their hands as well. After the journey, must be tiresome to go through this, but the camp managers say it's necessary. Then everyone has to queue up here for a medical check in that tent at the end. Rebecca's baby twins, Kelvin and Kelve, are identified as severely malnourished. She says she hasn't been able to harvest her crops for weeks and so hasn't produced enough breast milk. UN officials say these kinds of problems are typical among those arriving at the transit camp before they can be assisted and taken to long-term refugee settlements.
Most of the refugees arrive when they're very tired, because when you talk to them, they walk for a long distance. We also have cases where women arrive and claim they've been sexually harassed or raped.
It's cold here, especially at night. Blankets will help keep Rebecca's family warm until they can build a new home. Her husband, Innocent, thinks they'll never go back.
We've heard that here is peaceful. We're still on the way though. We're optimistic that everything will be better and not like Congo.
Their new life starts with spending the night on the floor of this shelter.
And now a recap of our top stories. ISIL claims attack on Save the Children in Jalalabad. Rohingya women are being gang raped by the Myanmar army. One-time U.S. gymnastics doctor is sentenced to 175 years in prison. Syrian refugees calls on Lebanon to take them in. That was all we have for you on today's World Focus. Do stay on for the rest of the program. I am Lamin Faal, presenting live from Biz FM 88.5.